I'm going to be going through these practice quiz questions step by step. So the first question is find the x-intercepts by using the zero product property, then sketch a graph by finding the vertex and connecting the 3 points. So the zero product property, well, in order to find the x-intercepts, we know we have to set y equal to 0. So we get 0 equals x squared minus 2x minus 8, and then we are going to factor that. So from there, we're going to create our box. We know the first term goes in the first box, the last term goes in the last box, and then we're going to go ahead and make our x. The product is negative 8x squared, and then the sum is negative 2x. So I need two numbers that multiply to negative 8x squared and add to negative 2x, which would be negative 4x and positive 2x. So from there, we're going to go ahead and place those in the box and then come up with the edges. So we get x, negative 4, and 2. And then we're going to set both of those factors equal to 0. And because of the zero product property, I can now separate these. X minus 4 equals 0, and x plus 2 equals 0. So our x-intercepts are 4 and negative 2. So we have 4, 0, and negative 2, 0. So I'm going to go ahead and plot those. So 4, 0, negative 2, 0. Now it also wants us to find the vertex. Now we remember that the vertex is halfway in between the x-intercepts. So what we're going to do is add the x-intercepts and divide by 2. So we get 2 divided by 2, which is 1. And then from there, we plug in that x value into the equation and solve for y. So we get y equals 1 squared minus 2 times 1 minus 8. So y equals 1 minus 2 minus 8, which is negative 9. So our vertex is 1, negative 9. So we'll go ahead and plot that, which is right here. Actually, sorry, right here. And then we're just going to connect those. Not the best line there. Okay, great. Okay, moving on to the next question. Graph the parabola by identifying the vertex, then making a table of values with 5 points. All right, so because this is in vertex form, we can easily find the vertex. So it's negative 3 because it's the opposite of that h value, and then k is 5. So we know the vertex is negative 3 and then positive 5. So we're going to go ahead and plot that. And then just like we did in our tutorials, when we pick our points, we have our vertex, and then I'm going to pick 2 points above and below. So negative 4, negative 5, and then negative 2 and negative 1. So if I plug in negative 2, I have the negative and then negative 2 plus 3 squared plus 5. So this ends up being negative, and then negative 2 plus 3 is 1, and 1 squared is 1. So we really end up getting negative 1 plus 5, which is 4. And so because it's symmetrical about the vertex, we also know that that's 4. So we have 4 and 4, and then we're going to go ahead and plug in negative 1. So negative, and then we get negative 1 plus 3 squared plus 5. So negative 1 plus 3 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So we get negative 4 plus 5, which is 1, which also means negative 5 is 1. So we get 1 here and 1 here. And then we're going to go ahead and plot those. And we get this. All right, moving on to the next question. Given the x-intercepts and the a value, write the equation in standard form. Okay, so right now we're given the x-intercept, so it makes sense to put it in factored form. So we have our a value. Because the x-intercept is -5, we know the factor would have been x plus 5. Because the x-intercept is 3, the factor would be 3. Now, in order to go from the x-intercept to standard form, we have to put it in factored form first. Then what we're going to do is just multiply this out. So we get y equals 2. I'm going to FOIL or distribute. So I get x squared, and then x times -3 is -3x. 5 times x is 5x. And 5 times -3 is -15. And then I combine like terms, so y equals 2 times x squared, then I get plus 2x minus 15. And the last step is to just multiply by 2. So when I do that, my final answer will be 2x squared plus 4x, and then we have minus 30. All right, next question. Write the equation of the parabola in vertex form given the vertex and a point on the parabola. So we are going to go ahead and write out in vertex form. So we don't know a. The vertex is 3, -4, so we know that this would be x minus 3 squared minus 4. And then in order to find a, we plug in the point for x and y. So we would plug in -2 for y, and then we're going to plug in 5 for x, and then continue. So we get -2 equals a. 5 minus 3 is 2 squared minus 4. Now, to not confuse us, we're going to go ahead and move this to the other side right away. So -2 plus 4 is 2, and then 2 squared is 4. So we get 4a, and lastly, divide by 4. So a equals 1/2. So when we write our final answer, we have y equals 1/2, and then we already know the vertex form is x minus 3 squared minus 4. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next one. So we have a word problem. So this is our modeling with quadratics section. So Griswold the grasshopper has a fantastic ability to jump. Yesterday, he set 2 new records on one jump by clearing a 6-foot fence and landing 14 feet away from his starting point. Assuming Griswold starts at the origin and jumps toward the positive side of the x-axis, write an equation of a parabola in vertex form so that we can model Griswold's record jump. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw out this situation. So we know that he's going to start at the origin. We also know that he's jumping over a 6-foot fence. So he just clears it. And then the last thing, so he jumps. We know that he jumps 14 feet in distance. Okay, so now we can label some points. Well, we know that this point is 0, 0. We know that this point is 14, 0. And lastly, the vertex. So we're assuming the highest point of his jump was halfway. So 7, 6. All right, so what we can do is write y equals a. We're going to write this in vertex form. So it's actually just like the last problem that we did, but we just had to kind of discover more things. It wasn't given to us. So now that I have it in vertex form, I can plug in a point. I typically like to plug in 0, 0 because it goes through this particular graph and it's easy. So we plug in 0 for y and then 0 for x. We also could have plugged in 14, 0. All right, next we have 0 equals a. This will be -7 squared. And then I'm going to go ahead and move that minus. I'm going to subtract 6, move it to the other side. So we end up getting -6 equals -7 squared is 49, and then times a. Then we have to divide by 49. So a is equal to -6 over 49. Now, we could actually just leave it like that. We don't need to turn it into a decimal. So we get y equals -6 over 49, and then x minus 7 squared plus 6. All right, next question. Write the equation of the parabola in standard form so that it is in vertex form by completing the square. Okay, so when we complete this square, how we did it was we wanted the a value to be 1. So step 1 is to divide everything by 2. So when we do that, we end up getting x squared minus 6x plus 6. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set this equal to 0. So I'm going to keep in mind that we divided by 2, and I'll have to reconsider that at the end, but right now I'm kind of ignoring it. So what we're trying to do when we complete this square is we're coming up with a new c value. So I'm going to move the 6 to the other side, and now it becomes negative. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw my box. So when we complete the square, we take the first term and put it in the first box. You take your middle term and you split it in half. And then you're going to come up with the edges, like so. So that last box completing the square is 9. So I'm going to put that in the blanks. So I end up getting what the factors are. I look at the sides of the boxes. It's x minus 3 squared because there's 2 of them. Negative 6 plus 9 is 3. And then I'm going to move that over. So I get x minus 3 squared minus 3. And then lastly, I need to multiply everything by 2. So we would get as our final answer y equals 2 times x minus 3 squared. And if you multiply negative 3 by 2, you get negative 6. And this last question is exactly like what we did the past couple days for homework, which is that quadratic template. So in this case, we're given standard form. So we're going to look at what we can answer right away. So looking at this, the a value is positive, so we know it will open up. The vertex, because it is opening upwards, is going to be a minimum. There is a vertical stretch or compression. There's actually none because the a value is 1. So it's not going to stretch or compress from the original parent function. The domain of parabolas is always all real numbers. The range we don't know yet. Vertex we don't know yet. Axis of symmetry we don't know yet. We do know the y-intercept. It's that c value. So it's 0, negative 5. And then we do not know the x-intercepts. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this in factored form first. So to put it in factored form, we factor it. So we're going to go ahead and factor x squared plus 4x minus 5. So we make our box. And we put the first term in the first box, the last term in the last box. And then we know that we have the product of negative 5x squared and the sum of 4x. So I need two numbers that multiply to 5 but add to 4, which would be 5x and negative x. And then we come up with the edges, and those are our factors. So factored form, we know the a value is 1, so I don't have to worry about that. But this would be x plus 5 and x minus 1. So now that we have factored form, we now know our intercepts. So if we were to set those equal to 0, we would get negative 5, 0 and 1, 0. Okay, so again, we get those by saying x plus 5 equals 0, and then you would subtract 5. X minus 1 equals 0, you would add 1. Now, to put this in vertex form, just like we actually did on the last problem, you are going to complete the square. So we have x squared plus 4x, and then technically we want a new c value, and I'm going to move over that negative 5 to the other side, and it becomes positive. So that will be our first step. A was already 1, so we didn't have to worry about that. So x squared goes in the first box. You take your middle term, you divide it in half, and then we place the outside numbers, and then you get your completed square number, which is 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. So then you write out what your factors are, which are x plus 2 squared equals 5 plus 4, which is 9. And then I'm going to go ahead and subtract that to the other side. So we get x plus 2 squared minus 9. And again, the a value is 1, so we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so now we know the vertex, it's the opposite of that h value, so it's negative 2 comma negative 9. The axis of symmetry is x equals negative 2. That's just the x value of the vertex. Okay, so we already know the vertex is negative 2, negative 9, and I'm going to go ahead and plot that. Okay, from there, oops. Okay, from there, we're going to go ahead and pick 2 points to the left, like negative 3 and negative 4, and 2 points to the right, like negative 1 and 0. So I'm going to plug it into factored form just because it seems like it's the easiest, and I'm going to plug in 0 first. So if I plug in 0, I get 0 plus 5 and 0 minus 1. So I get 5 times negative 1, which is negative 5. All right, and then that means that this also has to be negative 5. And then if I plug in negative 1, I get negative 1 plus 5 and negative 1 minus 1. So I get 4 times negative 2, which is negative 8, which means this is negative 8. So we'll go ahead and plot those. So we have negative 8, and then we have negative 5, and negative 5. And then before I actually graph this, we also know the x-intercepts are 1, 0, and negative 5, 0, so it makes sense to go ahead and plot those. We're going to connect it. And the last step is to write the range, which in this case would be y is greater than or equal to negative 9. Okay, so that is the step-by-step worked out solutions for the quiz, practice quiz.